lot of us have all these same things, and I think you're going to probably, what's the word I'm looking for, to be like, oh, that's me, and go, well, how can I get better and heal, and these people are the healers, so please enjoy. I hope you learn a lot, because I will be.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of spread this message that doesn't really get shared or spoken of very often. It's kind of something that's under the radar out there in the world of especially medicine when we're looking at fixing, rectifying problems that we have in our physiology, our energy levels, our mood, that sort of the stuff. Western medicine turns to medications or procedures if the problem's bad enough. And, the alternative, things like acupuncture and all this are very good for addressing specific imbalances. Oftentimes we need to take a big picture approach. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is addressing multiple aspects of health and wellness through holistic medicine and coaching. So, got to change this one too. So I got my notes on here, and I'm going to use the slides for you guys. So I'll do my best to streamline this so we can get out of here in a timely manner. So my name is Jason Troff. I'm a sports performance coach. I'm a certified diet and lifestyle coach. I'm an exercise kinesiologist, and I've been a Qigong instructor and practitioner for over 25 years. So I've developed a lot of sensitivity and awareness through my own refinement, through my own personal refinement, that is perhaps a little above and beyond what your average practitioner does. More pinpoint training is great. I've learned that taking a very broad approach to health and wellness is very effective. I'm also a former extreme athlete and kind of current. I still do some crazy stuff. That's me right there. You can't really see the tracks in the slide so much, but this was a few years ago, just up here in Bear Creek. And essentially, being a pro snowboarder, mountain biker, training a lot of martial arts, I managed to really mess up my adrenals and really mess up my digestion and really create a significant detox system problem, detox impairment. Like I wouldn't have known all this stuff if I didn't go through these trainings to figure out how all these systems intertwine together. But essentially, if you have a hormonal problem, you're going to develop a digestive or a detox system problem as well, and we'll get more into that as well. Let me just pull up my notes here. Okay. So our objectives today, we're going to learn what adrenal fatigue is and how it affects digestion and detox, like I just said. We're going to identify how diet and lifestyle play a major role in health and longevity, which seems obvious, but people tend to ignore it and just live by their habits. It's too easy to just follow your habits and not really follow sound principles that create results that you're looking for. And from that, we're going to get into creating a tipping point and trigger the self-healing mechanism in our body using a functional medicine approach. Our bodies are designed to thrive and be healthy. And when the stress levels get high enough, it starts affecting our organ systems. Eventually, we start developing symptomology related to our age and our stress patterns and all that. Does anybody know who that is in the picture from the Olympics? He's all washed up because he didn't win. No, that's Shaun White. This is the lip of the pipe down here. That's a real photograph. He won 7 out of 10 events going into the Olympics, and because he didn't win, he's washed up. I don't think so. He'll be back, and he'll probably get another medal. Incidentally, he is a Czech-trained athlete. So he worked extensively with Paul Chek to rehab an injury and learned how to train his body functionally and manage his diet and his lifestyle. So while people think he's kind of just a crazy guy, he knows a little bit more than your average athlete, and he's training in a holistic manner, which is fairly unique. So that's why I chose that photograph. So I just want to touch on functional medicine real quick. I'm not a doctor, but I'm able to apply functional medicine principles to my coaching practice, right? Because there's nothing that says I can't, right? It's knowledge, and knowledge is power. So functional medicine uses science and biochemistry, which focuses on the structure and the cellular elements of our existence, right? We know that most problems are caused by diet and lifestyle patterns that contribute to an accumulation of stress in our bodies. It is common sense would say that if we start here, that we would improve physical performance, energy, we could reverse unwanted symptoms, and that we'll need to look at our own habits to do that. So, diet and lifestyle is 50% of any cure for any problem, right? And lifestyle does include exercise, it includes your sleep, it includes your hydration. So we'll get into specifics about diet and lifestyle here in a minute. And as we get a little older, our stress loads do increase. They call it a midlife crisis for a reason. And sometimes we need nutritional assistance, hormonal assistance. We need a little supplementation to get back on track. So we'll talk about that. Quick disclaimer, because this is the United States. I'm not a doctor. This is not intended to diagnose, treat, or mitigate disease. Before starting any dietary or lifestyle or adrenal support program, you might want to check with your doctor, particularly if you're taking prescription drugs. All right, so what is adrenal fatigue? I'm sure some of you have some ideas. Maybe you don't, and that's why you're here. So from this, we want to know if you have it, and there's actual simple testing available. Saliva testing has been around for a long time, and it's very accurate. It can measure your hormonal output, and then we cross-reference that. We cross-check that with intake questionnaires and other assessments to determine the depth of adrenal fatigue or the effects of adrenal fatigue that you're experiencing. And then is self-care practical? It's a lot of people turn for help outside. They look for help outside themselves when we have our own internal self-healing mechanism. If we unload the stress patterns and we support ourselves and build ourselves up, we can have good health. We can experience healing and reversal of unwanted symptoms. So I say knowledge is power. Ignorance is not bliss, right? Ignoring this stuff doesn't make it better. If we ignore our dietary patterns, we'll eventually accumulate a lot of stress in our bodies if we're following the standard American diet. Incidentally, functional medicine and this holistic coaching model has a very high success rate. It works for those who are motivated, and people who are motivated usually have some level of pain or dysfunction that's bringing them to somebody like me or into a gym like this that's very holistically minded, so that we get a well-rounded approach. We come at it from multiple angles. We want to restore function and get out of pain. So, in discussing what adrenal fatigue is, this slide's a little complicated, but I'll break it down a little bit for you here in a minute. Essentially, we need to know how to restore balance and flow in this system, right? Because if it's out of system, and we'll come back to this in a second, if it's out of balance, you could have some of this going on, right? It's a very wide variety of symptoms that can present. You could have 1, 2, or 3, or 5, or 10 of these things, and this is a short list, right? This list gets bigger. If you really get into what a hormonal imbalance can cause in the physical body, it's pretty much everything under the sun. And all of this stuff leads to what Western medicine calls dis-ease. a disease. If you have cancer, if you have an autoimmune problem, major like MS diagnosis or lupus or, something major that's labeled by Western medicine, you've already had some of this stuff, right? You progressed through a number of years, 10, 20, 30 years of symptomology to get to the point of having disease, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So in the functional medical model, Dr. Kalish, my teacher, really emphasized that identifying a hormonal imbalance or an adrenal insufficiency is the finest anti-aging medicine on the planet, bar none. Because if you can restore your hormonal integrity, you're going to fix digestion, you're going to improve your detox function, and you're going to have an elimination of symptoms, which of course, then you're not going to get a disease, hopefully. There's a lot going on out there in the world that can create disease, so we want to mitigate it to the best of our ability. Top 5 problems out of that list, if we had to narrow it down: weight gain, fatigue, depression, GI problems, and female hormone imbalance. The female hormone imbalance gets a little, it gets tagged into those other ones because females have a more complex hormonal system. You throw in the estrogen-progesterone balance, it's affected by the adrenal stability or the adrenal output. If adrenal output declines, females get estrogen-progesterone imbalance, and we'll talk more about that too, hopefully here. All right, so still kind of going broad picture, kind of general here. Western medicine doesn't really acknowledge adrenal fatigue. They kind of bypass it. We're seeing a change in this direction. Dr. Kalish has a clinical training program that you can find on the web that actually he trains over 100 Western medical doctors annually. So he's one of the go-to guys in this field of expanding functional medicine that is revolutionizing our medical care. The Mayo Clinic has invested tremendous amount of money, and Dr. Kalish has actually been hired. They did a clinical study. They found a high success rate with this system. So the Mayo Clinic then asked him to train their staff, right? So 10 years ago, this wouldn't have happened, but it is happening today. And so while somebody can be born with an adrenal production problem, any adult with one of these conditions went through a lot of onset symptomology. Usually the adrenals still get overlooked in advanced cases because bigger problems are occurring, like cancer, diabetes, or an autoimmune problem, right? So even if you're having problems, they don't necessarily look at the adrenals. They just kind of skim it over and go on to what's wrong, what the problem is, right? So what's creating the cortisol problem and what's happening to our other hormones, organ systems, and the way we feel. What's happening when those levels are off? When our production levels drop, what's going on? I'll get a little specific here now. So when we test adrenal fatigue, we're looking at cortisol levels. So this chart does show just your cortisol production. On the far left is normal. And then we go to stage 1 in the middle, and you can see elevated cortisol production in early stage adrenal fatigue. So an example of this is when we're in our 20s, or even our 30s, or it could happen as a teenager as well, we see an elevated cortisol production. And this is the body's response to an accident, a trauma, getting scared, jumping off a cliff on your snowboard or skis, and or having a tragedy in the family, or any number of things could cause this surge of cortisol production over a period of time. But in stage 1, it usually resets fairly quickly, and we go back to a normal level, and everything's fine. Well, that happens over and over and over, where we have these hormonal surges throughout our teens, 20s, and into our 30s. Eventually, that system starts to break down. So we see cortisol numbers on the test start dropping back into what could look like a normal level, but now we're on this side of the chart and we know that it's sliding and it's declining because we're also measuring DHEA, which is our anabolic growth hormone. And I'll talk about that again on the next slide here. So when we see that the cortisol dropping off and we see DHEA dropping off together, and those are getting lower, we know that there's been a chronic pattern of stress coming from diet and lifestyle typically, and a lot of self-inflicted stress that we do to ourselves, but external stress as well. And we start seeing lower levels, and that's when we start seeing symptoms, right? We don't see health symptoms unless we see deficiencies at this level. That's a very important thing to understand. And then stage 3, just to touch on this real quick, if it drops into this right-hand box and we're way down here and cortisol levels drop really low and DHEA levels are really low, that's typically when we see disease. That's when we see cancer, heart disease, severe arthritis, severe imbalances, and that's when we're in the hospital doing Western medical approaches typically because we're in dire straits. So our DHEA it's an abbreviation for a word that I don't really want to try to pronounce right now, and I don't know if you do either. But it's our anabolic growth hormone. It what stimulates the growth and repair cycle in our body. These numbers naturally drop off as we age, just as our enzyme production drops off. Typically our immune function tends to decline as we age. And it's all related back to this DHEA stuff, right? So it's a precursor to testosterone and estrogen as well. So when we're talking about male hormones and female hormones and keeping those levels up, and now you can go buy testosterone supplements, which is, you're kind of missing, you're going a few steps down the line if you're taking a testosterone cream or even, just using progesterone creams or something. You're missing the precursor to the situation. You're not addressing it at a foundational level. You're kind of still reaching for a Band-Aid to put on the problem, right? So if you address a DHEA deficiency with adrenal support, you are going to support digestion, detox, and you're going to be giving yourself anti-aging medicine, essentially. So back to this slide. I didn't lie to you. I said I'd come back to it. Here we are. So up here it's titled Pregnenolone Steal. So I'm going to talk about pregnenolone for just a moment. It's another item that our body creates. Our body creates DHEA, our body creates cortisol. Those are further down in the pathway. Up here, coming from cholesterol, from the fats that you consume, your body makes pregnenolone. And pregnenolone feeds all the hormones. Your adrenals make over 50 different hormones, but we really just focus on the key ones that are, targeted as when they go low. Because if we bring cortisol and DHEA up, we're going to support the whole system, right? So pregnenolone steal is a term that describes what happens in a chronic stress response. Let's say you're 32, 35 years old, and things have started to dip, and the situation goes on, just like we were saying a few seconds ago right here, right? You could be in a stage 2 for 20 years and have depressed DHEA and cortisol, right? You could live the rest of your life in an adrenal insufficiency until you do something about it. So when we're here talking about pregnenolone steal, if we're in a stress response, the pregnenolone is being rerouted. The X right here indicates that it's not really coming into the growth hormone pathway anymore. All of this, the DHEA, testosterone, your estrogens, everything is keeping things repairing nicely. But if pregnenolone starts getting diverted over here to make cortisol, this is a problem. It'll bypass and stop feeding the growth hormone process. And this leads to symptomology, right? We can't have a deficiency. I want to give you a little analogy here. I call it my bicep analogy. So if you think of your hormones as your bicep, right, and you're doing curls in the gym, we're in a gym here, and you're pumping out curls, you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s, everything's going great, you're pumping away, and then this hormonal insufficiency starts to happen, all of a sudden you can only get a half curl out of that dumbbell anymore, right? So you just keep going. You just keep doing half curls, but then it's not feeling right, so what do? You reach for sugar, you reach for caffeine. Red Bull is a multi-billion-dollar, those energy drinks are a multi-billion-dollar industry right now because people are having hormonal insufficiencies. So they can't get a full curl by themselves, so they have to stimulate. I'm also going to throw it out there that exercise is a stimulant, right? It can be used correctly or incorrectly. You can exacerbate this fatigue situation, or you can really help it and support it depending on how you exercise. So, using caffeine to get the full curl, eventually that fatigues also. And the insufficiency at the DHEA and the cortisol level goes even worse. So we break it out into different stages of adrenal fatigue. We have stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Some people use other ways to measure the rate of decline in the system, but this is the most common. So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, just like we were talking about here, determined by what your body is able to produce. So what happens when this goes off is we start seeing symptoms in the 3 primary body systems, right? We have lots of different systems in our body, but these are the main 3. It simplifies it, right? We don't need to get all scientific here. We have hormones, digestion, and detox. And if we can optimize and keep these going, you're going to stay healthy for a long time. So hormones are the chemical messengers that travel through the bloodstream and transmit messages from the glands to the cells regarding growth, development, and energy. They're delicate. You can't really, if you stay out one late night past 11 p.m. with bright lights, loud music, alcohol, whatever, it takes an average of 3 days for your hormonal system to recover. That's significant, right? And this comes from clinical testing. They know that it takes your body 3 days to recover from one late night. And it doesn't even have to be past 11. It could be past 10 o'clock, right? Typically, if your body's in a state of decline hormonally, and you're staying up past 10 with the lights on or the TV on, I mention this again later, you're going to exacerbate that hormonal deficiency. The digestion, as we will discuss in more detail here, has everything to do with how you feel. It's responsible for nutrient absorption, immune function, neurocognitive function, and proper detox capabilities. So it feeds into the next one, into detox, which our human bodies are like, it's like a factory. We have raw goods coming in. So let's think of like a mill or a factory. You've got raw materials coming in, you got finished product going out the other side, and what's right in between is a smokestack. Every production piece of machine, equipment, everything, these computers, everything that was made went through this process. Raw materials in, finished product out, smokestack or byproduct in between, right? So, what we do is we set up either a positive or a negative feedback loop within these 3 body systems. If we have stress in the hormonal system, it's going to feed stress into the GI system, which is going to eventually start to feed stress into the detox system, and we'll get more into this as well. It can also go positive, right? So if we restore and rebalance the hormonal side of things, it's going to feed energy and support into the GI tract, which then feeds energy and support into the detox function. Very simple. It's not rocket science. It's actually kind of cool. So, if we want to identify the typical causes of health problems, we can see here that this list of stressors, death and divorce being the highest. If you have a death in the family, a death of a loved one, even a pet, or divorce, which sometimes you think it's a relief to get out of a relationship, but your physiology doesn't know the difference. You're going to suffer a huge amount of stress if you go through a divorce. For women, the second or the third childbirth is where they start to really see a lot of physiological stress. You know, their body they're giving so much life essence and so much energy and so much love. There's so much giving going on that it starts to really take a toll hormonally. And then, of course, overwork, long-term poor diet, and personally determined stress. What's that? It's what we decide is stress for us. You know, it's a lot of times we create more stress in our lives than is actually happening to us. We just decide that a certain event is really traumatic, and our hormonal system doesn't know the difference. It just says, oh my God, we're under stress. So from that, we get a decreased immune response over there on the left. You see that if there's a lot of hormonal stress, the immune system goes down. Our body actually slows its production of Sig-A or secretory IgA, the immunoglobulin that is our hormonal, or it's our antibody defense system. And it goes on in the mucosal linings of the body. So your sinuses, your throat, your lungs, your digestive tract, female, all your male, urogenital stuff, anything that has a mucosal lining is where this antibody production happens. And if we're in hormonal stress adrenally, that antibody production will start to drop. That makes us more susceptible to pathogens, parasites, yeast infections, bacterial infections, foodborne illness, and our bodies are really good at masking those. Like we can develop we can acquire an infection from traveling, drinking water, even locally. Entire cities have been infected. There was a city in Minnesota, the entire city got infected with cryptosporidia from the water, from municipal water. Santa Monica, California had an enormous outbreak of, I think it was blasto or one of these other parasites that, they just started seeing a rash of people flooding into the clinics everywhere for digestive problems. And it took them a few months to figure out that it was in the municipal water and it wasn't being taken care of by the chlorine, and the treatment facility wasn't working properly. So it doesn't matter where you get it. If you have a hormonal insufficiency, your immune system will take a little dip, and chances are you're going to have higher susceptibility to acquiring a pathogen. That goes for food intolerances as well, which is a developed thing. We typically aren't born with food intolerance. In some cases, yes, but as adults, we develop food intolerance. So gluten is a big one that is kind of resisted in the mainstream, but more and more people are discovering that gluten, the proteins found in wheat products, are affecting them. And you have to kind of come to that awareness yourself. And that's one of the main remedies for removing dietary stress is to go gluten-free for a while. Leaky gut syndrome, just got to touch on that for a second, because leaky gut syndrome is when food antigens or proteins are getting into the bloodstream through a compromised gut, and once they're in the blood, they cross the blood-brain barrier and they mess up neurotransmitter function, right? So our serotonin and our dopamine, our brain chemicals are altered when these proteins are getting in through a leaky gut into the brain. That's why we see widespread mental, emotional, depression, all these things that are being medicated by Western medical community are directly related to the food that's breaking down our gut. And I'll just mention real quick, genetically modified foods are a big culprit for this. So you should get online and research what genetically modified foods are doing to the digestive lining. They're designed to explode the gut on a bug. When the Roundup Ready crops, when you put that pesticide on the crop, the bug's digestion explodes and the bug dies. And we eat those chemicals in low doses according to what's safe. The FDA tells us it's safe to eat low doses of these chemicals if you're eating a genetically modified or even just a pesticide sprayed food. So whoever doesn't think organic and eating organic is important, they don't understand the science behind this, right? Low dose chemical consumption daily adds up to a GI problem, which then goes into detox system overwhelmment. If you have a pathogen, you have leaky gut, you've got, a constant load of stressful food coming into the system, you are going to develop a detox system overload scenario. And, let's face it, even in a beautiful mountain town like Telluride, we can have a lot of exposure to toxins through the water. We have the mining here, we've got heavy metals. We've got, every day on Main Street here, I'm smelling diesel exhaust. You can't get away from it. It's everywhere. And then if you're eating it in your food, it's even worse. So how do we fix it? We want to correct it in the order that it occurs. And this is a proven system, right? So I'll try to fly through this slide real quick. We want to use stress management, healing diet, spiritual and emotional support or skills, exercise, the right kind of exercise, sleep, restoring healthy sleep patterns, which you can actually do, and supplementation when needed, as identified by labs. Usually I like to use labs to understand what the insufficiency is. So that improves the adrenal, the female hormone, and the thyroid aspect. Incidentally, thyroid imbalance is a byproduct of an adrenal imbalance. If you want to fix a thyroid problem, you don't just medicate the thyroid, you go to the root cause. You look at the adrenal insufficiency, you look at the diet, you look at the lifestyle, and you can begin to bring balance into the thyroid, which is, it's the thermostat for your body, it's the regulator on the body. So it'll upregulate itself. If the room gets cold, the thermostat brings the heat up, right? And that's what happens in our bodies. Stress is going on, it'll turn the temperature up, and it can only do that for so long before it starts to wear out the pathway, just like the adrenals. The thyroid, the hypothalamus, pituitary thyroid axis starts to get worn out, just like the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis starts to get worn out when you're just cranking away and you're not really paying attention to how you're cranking away and you're not nourishing yourself adequately. So to heal the gut, we look at nutrient replacement, amino acids, essential fatty acids, minerals. We want to treat a leaky gut, look at probiotics and enzymes, and get rid of the bacteria, the parasites, and the yeast dysfunction that is always present. If you have a parasite, you have a yeast infection. If you have a yeast infection, you're going to have a parasite infection. We all have these bugs in us. It's how our immune system can manage those populations, and if we and ward off the bad ones. If we get exposed to a bad bug while we're traveling, we want to hopefully have an immune system that can handle it. And then for the liver, for the detox, we support the liver. We want to improve the detox pathways, support the kidney function, support the skin elimination, the sweating process. And we also have to look at heavy metals if we're going to really get to the bottom. A lot of times people will have a heavy metal overload toxicity just from either amalgam fillings in their mouth or from drinking a lot of water with lead in it or something as a child, and then you move, you still don't know why you're having problems. Well, this goes back to this slide that if you start here with a detox overload problem, it's going to create a hormonal imbalance. And vice versa. You could start with a GI pathogen infection. You could have a healthy hormonal system and develop an infection from traveling, and then then you're into that negative feedback. But 95% of the time, it starts with a hormonal insufficiency because we are in a stress-filled society, right? It's like our stress levels are so high that the hormones take the hit first, and then the cascade goes just like I described. All right, so the Kalish model, this is what I use primarily. I use a lot of assessment methodology, some more than others, but I address these foundational principles like I've been talking about here, and we're going to touch on each of those in a little more depth here in just a moment. And at the end of this presentation, you'll find out how you can get started assessing your own hormonal system and correcting either an adrenal, digestive, or detox system imbalance. It's not as hard as you think. So how did we get here? We've got all these symptoms going on. Before we can talk about reversing the problems, we need to have a better idea of how we ended up with these nagging symptoms. Our energies are low and our performance levels drop off as we age. So how did we get here? I think that's how we got here. We're trying to do it all. And, I like this slide because she is exercising. She's doing yoga, kind of, and she's lifting weights. But she's also communicating, and she's trying to cut loose and have a drink and read her favorite book and manage, take care of the baby, check her emails and get on Facebook and all that stuff. And then she's got to cook something. She's got the little whisk there. She's going to go cook dinner too, right? So we think this is normal, right? This is stress, right? And we can't just eliminate all these, but we can learn how to reframe stress and manage our lives a little bit better so we don't have a huge problem. My typical client is 30 to 50 years old, has more than one symptom that they've tried to answer with Western medicine or alternative approaches. They usually fall into that top 5 list of weight gain, fatigue, depression, GI problems, or a female hormone imbalance. And they think they're doing the right things, but they don't understand why they're having the symptoms, right? They think that they are doing good exercise and that they're, releasing their stress or whatever, but typically they're doing a number of things wrong. So I get to coach these individuals about the GMO foods, about caffeine and sugar, toxic oils in the processed food diet, excessive exercise in sports or in their training that we discussed, their nocturnal habits, their circadian rhythm stress, their overworking and their increased perceptions of stress. There's this kind of a repeating pattern here. You've heard me say these things a few times now. It's not rocket science. It's the repeating pattern. We do the same things and we create the problem. So we need to and we want to learn how to stay happy and productive without paying a heavy price. All right, so in these body systems, we see the drop in production on the hormone level. The leaky gut turns on as we get more stressed and we develop intolerances, and then we get toxic overload, right? It's very simple. The 3 ways people get sick and fatigued: it's emotional stress, dietary stress, and inflammatory stress. And essentially, most people have one or all 3 of these going on at the same time. Physical injury and instability is also a direct result of this stressful lifestyle pattern and not really knowing how to support yourself. So postural imbalances not being addressed, only training the phasic or dynamic muscle system while ignoring the effect that diet is having on the stabilizer system, and hypermobility or hypermobile individuals stretching too much or vice versa, which means that somebody who's really big and strong and tight only doing strength training and not stretching. So we have to start to look at the way we train our bodies if we want to unload stress from our physiology in the exercise department. So postural dysfunction is the number 1 cause of orthopedic injuries. People don't realize that posture is the beginning and ending of movement. And if you've got a postural dysfunction, you're carrying extra stress in your physiology, right? Over 90% of sixth graders have a severe postural imbalance nowadays. And it's not just because there's no good PE classes out there, it's because of the diet. So the diet affects the stabilizer system, stabilizer weakness. There's an inhibition at the neurological level in the spine and in the core. And we see that directly carry over into the stability of their joints. So I'm going to say this really nice. I kind of might have just said it, but if we get started at the gym without restoring some of the work tolerance in our stabilizer system at the same time, integrating stabilizer system training, we tend to only reinforce a postural imbalance or a faulty recruitment pattern that our nervous system is holding on to. So that's kind of a mouthful, but essentially the diet affects our stabilizer function, and from that instability, we can't just jump in the gym and start training big dynamic movements, and we can't just start jumping off cliffs and not think that the house of cards is going to collapse at some point, right? We have to build the stabilizer system as we start to build the dynamic movement system of the body. A little plug for the Czech Institute. I'm a Czech certified trainer, and it's the world's premier educational facility for addressing physical imbalance with a holistic approach. So looking at the whole picture, diet, lifestyle, mind, body, and physical, all together. And Paul Chek developed that holistic lifestyle coaching wing of the Institute because his trainers, the people he was certifying in corrective exercise, weren't getting the results that he was getting with his clients. And he was talking about diet and lifestyle. So any good trainer is going to talk about diet and lifestyle as much as they talk about holding your form in an exercise. So there's no real physical education when we're young. We talked about that. And the hypermobility thing, I'm just going to touch on it real quick. If you're hypermobile, there's a quick little flexibility index test that you can do. And if you're hypermobile and you go to yoga class 3 or 5 times a week, and then you try to go skiing, eventually you're going to get an injury. It's kind of the general pattern that we see in a mountain town like this, is we see a lot of yoginis that are really flexible and they look great, but they're kind of like Gumby dolls walking down the street, right? If they had to load up their body with a heavy amount of load and move, which is what happens when you pressure your outside leg on a ski turn and you try to push really fast, or then you hit a bump and everything goes, whoa, because there's a lot of movement and instability in the joints. And then conversely, the big, strong guy who's really tight and inflexible, when he slams, his joints are really tight, so he develops muscle and connective tissue injuries. But we see less joint pathology or injury in individuals who are really tight. We see more soft tissue injury and sprains and strains and that sort of thing. Whereas the hypermobile individual, when they fall, they get a joint injury. It goes deeper for them. It goes all the way to that, full subluxation, the full disc derangement, the full, rotator cuff tear or something like that. So we just have to teach people how to eat right, good diet lifestyle principles, and to train right for their type based on an assessment that matches them. Try to keep moving here. So here's just a quick visual example of what a postural derangement is and how it affects the load on your physiology. So the guy on the right, for each inch on this diagram, those are inch increments, 32 to 42 pounds per inch. When that happens, when we've got a lot of tension in the neck and the medial rotation of the shoulder and everything's coming forward, it's because we've been kind of feeling like we're being hunted, right? Like there's a saber-toothed tiger around the corner and it's called your boss at your job, or, maybe you've got a financial situation and you're worried about the tax man or the bill collector coming to get you, and then, or you don't have enough food in the fridge. So you start getting this like protective fight or flight mechanism. It's the opposite of being open and relaxed. And just, we can actually affect our mind with our posture. So if we get in the gym and we start training these postural muscles, our mental emotional state changes. And we start to lift, the gray cloud starts to lift, and we start to feel like we're more in control of our situation instead of our situation controlling us. Same goes for diet and lifestyle. If we're going to address those foundational issues, our energy is going to improve, our mental outlook improves, and we can start to find happiness inside of us instead of outside of us. It's not the car, it's not the house, it's not the location. Happiness is something that you either hold in your heart or you don't, right? And then we get to enjoy the amenities of the world from a balanced place. So I threw the Kalish slide in one more time, just because we can affect our whole paradigm that we live by addressing these foundational issues. So real quick on this, I'll try to make it quick. Foundational principles, just really fast. So thoughts. It comes first in terms of how we influence our own health. Some of us believe more than others in the power of our intention and our beliefs, right? Paul Chek says, the way you look on the outside has everything to do with how you think on the inside. And the way you feel on the inside has everything with how you use your mind. Everything to do with how you use your mind. And there's tons of mind science, law of attraction, mastermind principle stuff out there, Think and Grow Rich, all of this. It goes back, there's tons of this documented, proven stuff, but we don't do it consistently enough. We don't think positively about our situation. So we can do a lot in that area. This is where I get into my coaching protocols with a client, usually after I've got the lab results back, and they're going, well, how do I do it? I have to use some affirmations, some journaling, get some new ideas, plant some seeds in their mind so they start thinking a little bit differently about their situation. Breathing. Each of us breathes an average of 20,000 breaths per day, but most of us aren't doing it intentionally to relax, as a stress management tool, as a means of improving vitality or connecting to higher consciousness. The breath is that bridge, it is that connection. It also falls under oxygen therapy, right? There's a whole movement out there about oxygen therapy. Best oxygen is breathing. Breathe fresh air, move your body, and you'll be more healthy. So when we do that, it calms the fight or flight system, it improves detox and digestion, relaxes the mind, and it gets you in touch with Dr. Quiet. So I'm not going to go too much into the 4 doctors, but Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, he started treating using isolated substances from plants as prescriptions for healing. And his main system was based on 3 doctors, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, and Dr. Happiness, right? Paul Chek added a 4th. He added Dr. Movement, because we have to move our body pump if our mind is going to be healthy. So breath work is directly related to calming the mind and being calm and content, so we develop a relationship with ourselves at a deeper level. Hydration, I call it performance hydration. If you're consuming half your body weight in ounces per day, so I drink about 4 quarts a day. I just carry a jar mostly, or a bottle if I can, but the jar is easier for me because I know if I put 4 of those down, I'm doing good, and that is my 4th today. So I'm right on right on target. I'll probably hit 5. Living at altitude, and if you're exercising a lot or you're under a lot of stress, you should drink a little bit more water. I recommend filtered water from a quality source whenever possible, and spend more money on the filter. Don't skimp. Buy a good filter, and if you can't, bottled water over tap water typically. We think even in this high mountain town that tap water is good. I have a lot of clients here that are showing up with high toxicity levels, high heavy metal levels in their bodies, and I directly relate it to the water. If they're drinking tap water daily, they're consuming considerable amounts of heavy metals. And then we get the chlorine to try to, in the US here, and a lot of first world countries use chlorine to manage the dysentery and all the amoebas and the problems in the water. So it's a good thing, right? It's a catch-22. If we didn't have the chlorine in the water, we'd probably have a lot more problems. But you can access healthy water that doesn't have chlorine in it, and again, unload a huge stress from your body. Diet is your acquired life force. This one's a little sizable. I'll try to keep it really concise here. 50% of all problems vanish within weeks or within months of modifying the diet. When people learn what trigger foods are and they get them out of the diet and they learn what the alternatives are and how to eat them, they get healthy. The average American consumes 15 pounds of toxins, of chemicals, of additives, food colorings, antibiotics, bovine growth hormones, and excitotoxins annually. 15 pounds. So just in your mind, picture you have a bucket of poison in your house, in your pantry. It's a gallon-sized bucket. It weighs 15 pounds. And you are required to take a teaspoon of that poison every day and put it in a glass of water and drink it. Until that bucket, maybe it's not a teaspoon, maybe it's just a quarter teaspoon. But at the end of the year, your bucket is empty, and you've consumed that many toxins in your processed diet. So anything that has a label on it at the store, if it doesn't say organic and non-GMO, and it doesn't have the GMO products in it, you can bet it has natural flavors, colorings, additives, all these things that are chemicals for our bodies. So, trying to jump ahead here because I know we're running out of time. So, if people have energy problems, they will defend their consumption of these processed foods. The bad sweeteners, the hidden chemicals, and all the excitatory food enhancers that are in the commercial food, right? Because their energy levels are low, their adrenal production's low, their digestion's off, so they're turning towards processed foods in higher amounts. And the obvious caffeine, sugar thing is there, but people don't realize that just packaged foods it's a crutch for health, essentially. And as we've mentioned with exercise, people often exercise before, or they go beyond what's supportive for them. If a hormonal, digestive, or detox system is under stress, we have to look at ways of how we can manage that and get them to exercise to fit their hormonal stress levels. So the golden rule here, really quick, is if you have energy to work out before you work out, then you should work out. But if you're dragging your butt into the gym and you didn't want to turn off the TV and get off the couch to come to the gym, you don't have energy to work out. You're the type of person that should work in and develop meditative practices. Yoga is a meditative practice. Qigong, meditation, breath work, and any type of movement that can be done at a conversational pace. Walking, very mellow walking, chilling, earthing, getting bare feet on the ground so you're drawing up healing, earthing energy are all ways that you can exercise without adding stress to your physiology. And finally, sleep. Hormonal integrity is directly related to our sleep or circadian rhythm patterns. As I mentioned earlier, TV, computer, bright lights. I kind of like this right now. It's a little dark in here, but the sun is down. And we don't have the lights cranked in here, which is awesome because all of our hormonal systems right now are going, thank you. I'm not being told that the sun is on. And this isn't that bright either. A TV screen, actually this screen that I'm looking at, is flickering at about 60,000 flashes. Look at this screen, my hypothalamus thinks that the sun is still out. It thinks that it's noon and the sun is directly above my head because it's shining right here into my eyes, right? So simple way for you guys to mitigate circadian rhythm stress and manage it and start to correct a sleep imbalance is by making sure that TVs and computers are shut off by 9 p.m., I say 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and start dialing the lights down a little bit. As soon as the sun goes down, don't crank all the lights. It's not that hard. We don't want to turn our fight or flight system on, so try it for a few weeks and see how that goes for you. Another visual here on this circadian rhythm stress real fast. The top slide shows a normal pattern. So see if I can use my cursor or no. Okay, so the black line is your cortisol production. We've talked about an elevated cortisol response in early stage and then it drops. Well, down here, this is that elevated. Look at the black line going through midday past 6 p.m. down here, and that cortisol levels are still really high. So this would be considered a stage 1 elevated adrenal stress response. And what it does, instead of having a long growth and repair window, which maintains our youthful vigor and our athleticism and our stabilizer system function, and it keeps us young and healthy and vibrant, the white line is growth hormone production. This is that DHEA that we were talking about. So if we have good growth hormone production for a long physical repair, psychological repair window while we're sleeping, you're going to live longer and be healthier. Bottom line. When we see this, and then that cortisol line starts to go into deficiency, this doesn't get longer. It actually continues to get shorter. So we have a shorter physical repair and a shorter psychological repair window hormonally when we have circadian rhythm stress. And then we have to consider Chinese medicine. There's a clock here going on. So while we're sleeping, we go into the triple warmer system, the gallbladder, the liver, the lungs, and then the large intestines, and then we wake up and the stomach says, feed me, right? So think about this. Your detox systems, the triple warmer up here, it's called Sanjiao, that's the Chinese name for it, but triple warmer is your fight, flight, freeze response. It's the harmonizer between your body systems, right? So the great harmonizer starts 9 p.m., 9 to 11. And if your lights are on bright and you're going crazy and you're out partying after 9 p.m., that's great if you're 19 years old. But after age 32, 35, if you're still doing that kind of stuff, you're going to develop a severe imbalance in your circadian rhythm and your hormonal patterns. And then our detox systems are working overtime when we're out there partying, drinking, right? So if it's on the clock at midnight to 3 a.m., that's for a reason. It's because the sun is down and your body is restoring itself and processing toxins and getting them out of your body. We could talk about this for a long time, but keep moving here. So real quick, how do we determine if our systems are on overload? I like that shot, huh? It's a pretty gutsy driver, So if that's a human body, that's kind of what some people do to their bodies too. So we don't want to assess, we want to guess. We don't want to guess, we want to assess. We want to use labs to find out how deep the insufficiency is. There's other ways to test and assess using energy medicine. You can look at energy system imbalances through other diagnostics as well. I do diet lifestyle pattern assessments, pain and symptom mapping. That goes back to this. So just real quick in a nutshell, if you've got problems along a meridian for, say, the adrenals, kidney and adrenals right over here at 6 p.m. or 5, it's 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. is the kidney adrenal time. If you've got a kidney adrenal insufficiency, you will most likely have pain or an injury pattern in that kinetic chain, right? So if you look at a meridian chart, I think we're jumping ahead here. If we look at the pain and symptom mapping means that I look at the kinetic chain and see where the injury is, where the pain is, and I tie it back to that map in the chart to see which organ systems are under stress. And it's a very tried and true system. Even if you don't think it was your fault that you hurt your elbow, that you fall down, or maybe somebody knocked you over, or you were in a car accident and it was the other guy's fault, but you broke your arm, you broke your wrist, I'm going to look at where that injury pattern, how it, what bone broke or what ligament got strained, which kinetic chain, which organ system is deficient or screaming for some energy through the injury pattern or the tension pattern. So it gets a little out there. It gets a little bit like, is this guy practicing voodoo or what? Is it like, some kind of black magic? Well, it's actually just common sense. The body is very intelligent. It will create tension and stress along a kinetic chain. We see tons of medial knee injuries, liver channel, right? Outside of the leg is gallbladder. Coming up around the neck and shoulder, chronic tension in the shoulder, liver gallbladder, up around the head and the ear, ringing, tinnitus in the ear, headaches, is all in the liver gallbladder channel, right? So if we want to mitigate symptoms, we have to start thinking consciously and just kind of using common sense here to understand what's going on. So unfortunately, the Western medical approach waits until the problem is pretty big and they try to do crazy things to fix it, like tying a rope onto this huge truck that's overloaded. Right? They use antidepressants, anti-inflammatories, put you on thyroid support. They'll just cut your gallbladder out if it's, sometimes you have to have your gallbladder removed if it's completely infected, but I'm sure about 9 times out of 10 you could avoid a gallbladder removal by managing yourself. And then, of course, spinal fusions, discectomies, where they just fuse your spine together, is a very common practice. The disc of a spine will heal itself. It just takes longer than most people are willing to wait. Average disc healing process is 500 days, right? So they re-injure it before it has a chance to really heal. They go 6 months or a year of being careful, and then it starts to feel better. Next thing you know, they're out crashing on their bike or jumping off cliffs again, or just trying to bend over and pick up the kid, but their disc never fully healed. So diet, nutrition, again, how do we speed healing? We correct the hormonal insufficiency, we improve digestion, we get the detox system working, and the body will heal itself. And a little bit of corrective exercise could really help too. So we're almost done. Got like 3 slides left. Surrounding the dragon is it's a Chinese medical term. It's a theory of, how are you going to take down this dragon? You think this one guy is going to do it with his sword? I would say that he's going to lose and that animal is going to win. Would you all agree? Not much of a chance there, right? It looks he looks valiant with his sword, but he's going down, right? So we need a diverse and a varied attack. We need a diverse and varied arsenal with a consistent attack. That means that we get educated on these diet lifestyle principles and we use them, we implement them consistently enough until we start to feel a change. If we could eat correctly for 2, 3, 4 months and start exercising correctly and turning down the lights and drinking more water, you're going to start noticing big changes. And then if we're throwing in some adrenal support and some nutrient supplementation on top of that, you will not need to go to another doctor because you're consulting your doctors. You're talking to your own doctors that way. So complementary therapies are ways that we can vary the attack. That includes like Chinese medicine, energy medicine, breath work, body work, neuromuscular therapies, meditation. We talked about earthing, qigong practices, all the diet lifestyle stuff. There's lots of ways we can, and then the adrenal support, the supplementation, a lot of ways we can have a consistent attack. And in closing here, awareness is always the first step to change, and being honest with yourself and not seeking the approval of others creates strength and stability. I put that quote together from an old, awareness is the first step towards change. You hear that all over the place. And then Paul Chek actually threw in that part about being honest with yourself. So we want to do what we know is right for us based on getting educated, which is what's happening right here. And then we often don't know how good we can feel until we feel better. We think that our energy level is what it is. And until you actually address some of these foundational issues, you won't really know how good you can feel. About 8 years ago, I was in a dire place. I spent a year with a very poor quality of life. And, towards the end of that year, I'd been to all kinds of doctors, done all kinds of antibiotics. Nobody could tell me what was wrong with me. And fortunately, I started studying functional medicine and holistic diet and lifestyle coaching, and here I am today. I have more energy now, and I feel stronger and more stable than when I was in my prime as an extreme athlete. If I knew now what I knew then, I would have been a world champion over and over and over again. And now I get to coach kids who are doing very well. The more they follow them, the better they do. If they don't follow them, they fall off, and then they learn from their experience, You got to get back on the horse once in a while. So we're going to have adrenal programs and coaching sessions. We do have those programs available. And we're also going to be doing another lecture series starting this spring, going into the summer, on these foundational principles of health, how to get more specific and really implement these for yourself. Thank you for coming, and I really appreciate it. Thanks. Questions? Anybody? Q&A? You want to turn the lights on a little bit? Just up a little bit.
I'm going to pass around